Good morning, friends. Perrin Lovett here for Prepper Post News, courtesy of Freedom Prepper, on Friday, November 20th, 2020. Got some great stories in the news for you here. Don't forget your Freedom Roasters coffee. And also, if you're going to build a podcast or videocast studio, might I recommend a heater or doing it in a heated space. But not too bad in here. Actually feels pretty good. I tried to adjust the light. Still a work in progress, and when I look at it, it blinds me. Moving on to our featured topic. This is something that I really have not seen in the news much, but it's something that preppers, outdoorsmen, survivalists, and just good old-fashioned Americans should be interested in. And that is, we've been told that the AP has selected Joe Biden as president. We know that the real election comes on the 14th of December. But anyway, let's assume that he makes it in, and he is inaugurated on January 21st. What would a Biden administration mean for gun control? How would a Biden administration affect the 2A? So I've got a couple of things. Oh, by the way, your reading for the day, let me find here. Oops, I lost my page. I really lost the page. Well, you don't need to see the page. Check out the Founders' Second Amendment by Stephen Halbrook. It's mine's an autograph copy. Met Stephen a number of years ago. But anyway, that's not part of the news. I tried to look it up this morning. I wanted to see what the Biden-Harris campaign site said about gun control. And I didn't find it right off, but there's an old delinked archive copy. All their page says now is, thank you, victory, thank you, Associated Press. But I found their page on gun safety. And I've got a link to that right here. Ban, regulate, buy back, reduce, keep out, require, close, reinstate, close, hate crime, loophole, blah, 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 fugitives, end, negative, 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 negative. But it goes on for like 11 pages. It's the same old liberal gun control argument we've been hearing for 30 years. I'm not really that worried, honestly. First of all, these guys, it's their job to put out the big pie in the sky picture. How much of it ever comes to pass? It's usually a small fraction. And plus, if Biden and Harris make it in, they're probably going to have a Republican Senate. So any of the big ticket items will be stalled out. But so that's my position. We need to be aware of this as we do everything else, but we also need to not necessarily worry too much about it. I know people have been buying record numbers of guns this year. That's generally good, but we've also seen something else. Gun control was a left-wing issue forever, and 2020 has demonstrated that the left, particularly the radical left, has fully embraced gun control, for better or frequently for worse. So I think at this point it's a moot issue, and I'm actually not that happy about the reason, because this tends to point us towards conflict at some point. So I want to know what you think. And I've got some stories we're going to talk about. There's not a whole lot of gun control stuff. The usual sources are warning of a Biden administration. We've had gun control in this country for 80 years. And I remember, I don't have the book with me, but G. Gordon Liddy wrote a book called "When I Was a Kid, This Was a Free Country." And back when he was a small child, before the first gun control acts, the NFA, ever existed, a small child with enough money and a pencil and a stamp could mail order a .50 caliber Browning machine gun to his house. And yet and still we had a lower crime rate back then. So, as always, maybe it's not the guns. But, well, tell me what you think about that. I've seen some of the best comments this week. I actually saw comments from people that I really know outside of the confines of the studio. But let's take a look at some of the 2A stories in the news recently. And the first one, actually the first two, are from the NRA. So, you know, where you would expect the NRA Institute for Legislative Action. They warn of a more realistic type of danger, and that is the small items. And they've got a story I linked to at freedomprepper.com about the ATF pushing the putative Associated Prostitute selected Biden-Harris administration to tighten up on the small items, you know, stabilizers for target guns, unmilled receivers, things like that. You know, because they have, you know, an executive order and then a little tinkering with the code of federal regulations goes a long way. You know, we don't necessarily need a big, comprehensive bill out of Congress. But something even worse to look at, the second NRA story, is what's being presented right now in the various state houses. And the example they use is Texas. Texas, of all places, has a record number of gun laws being dropped even before the legislative session begins. I've got a quick rundown of those. Remember the old adage, nothing is safe while the legislature is in session. They've got, let's see here, banning. Going to ban private firearms sales at gun shows. Banning private firearms here and there. Banning long gun open carry. Red flag. Banning. Mandating how firearms are stored. Repealing part of the Castle Doctrine. Raising the minimum age to purchase guns. Gutting. I take it these are code sections. The first one is kind of ironic. They want to gut the code that for something that will make it easier for businesses to ban concealed carry CCW carriers from entering the premises. And the one of the statutes is 30.06. You know, got to get rid of that 30.06. Maybe get it down to a 22 size law. Take a look at those. I've got a graphic up. Most of that stuff is not going to pass, especially in a place like Texas. Although Texas, you know, is right behind somewhere like Georgia in a great demographic shift. There's a reason that all these California left-wing people are starting to move to places like Austin. And they've got other demographic changes too. But, you know, really there's been no support for gun control lately. Breitbart had a story that there was a poll that showed that calling for gun control was at its lowest point since 2016. And again, this year we've seen record numbers of buying guns. So it appears that Americans want guns. They don't want to ban them. Back to the former Vice President Biden, who the AP has selected as your next president outside of the law. Keith Wood had a brief explanation if you want the full in-depth treatment of where Biden stood on gun control. And he remembered a quote. Biden was at a car manufacturing plant, and a worker called him out on his gun control statements on his own website. And he told him that he was full of something, and he fully supported the Second Amendment. So make of that what you will. But don't, you know, these things are important, but don't obsess about them and don't worry about them. There are always alternatives, and there's always a brighter day ahead. And I've got a great little story I'll tell you. Come gather around here in the Cole studio. Mr. Perrin's going to tell you a quick story. You have conflict, and then you have wonderful things that come out of conflict eventually. In 1389, the Ottoman Turks tried to, again, invade Europe. And they were met by forces under a Serbian prince at the Battle of Kosovo, 1389. And this was a centuries-long conflict. Arguably it's still in progress today, but it was a European victory for Christendom. Now in this region of Kosovo, there were little flowers. I think it's civet in the native tongue, and they were white. They were called peonies. And after the battle, the ground was blood-soaked, and the flowers, according to folklore, absorbed it and turned into even more beautiful red flowers. So something pretty always comes out of that, and I understand those red flowers are quite popular with the ladies. So just keep that in mind. Moving on, we've got more great news in this unusual country this crazy year. No bareface. Now, if a year ago, if you had said, back in January, if you had said bareface, nobody would have known what you were talking about, outside of the Middle East with the burqas. Bank robbers might have understood your language. But in California, they've had yet another mandate that no one leave their home without a mask on, without a face diaper. Because of what the virus did. Now you can take don't get into science and the two studies the CDC published in May. Don't go back to the big medical study that was done after the Spanish flu pandemic that said they're useless. Got to wear a mask outside just because. Check that out. Also know you'll need your mask when you go to the mall on Black Friday. And that's just, what, a week, 2 weeks away? It's up on us. The most important part of the holiday season is buying stuff. Spending money you don't have on things you don't need, as Carlin said. Just like the Pilgrims. So you're reenacting history. You're probably going to want to do that at a big store, because the big box retailers, the ones that haven't gone bankrupt, are cleaning up during the pandemic season, while the smaller stores are beginning to fail, which kind of sounds like the same old retail song that we've been hearing for a couple of years. On the business front, Wall Street Journal reports that, remember the PPP bailout money? These quote-unquote loans that never had to be paid back, the trillions of dollars given to businesses because they couldn't operate because of what the virus did, not because the government came along and told them they had to close. But anyway, Uncle Sucker spent trillions of dollars propping up these businesses, and now we know that hundreds of them went bankrupt anyway. So make sure, when you read that story, you want to blame the virus. Remember, initially we were told that somebody ate a bat head sandwich at a seafood restaurant in Wuhan. So ignore the shifting of the narrative. And for God's sakes, ignore those politicians like Cuomo and all the others who have wrecked your economy just to do it. The money was well spent, even if it appears that it was burned. Burning in the world. We've got another scaremonger story. The same journalist, this is a Business Insider story, the same journalist that keep telling us that Biden won, Trump lost, even though nothing has been certified, now fear that Trump is about to go crazy at the very end and launch all-out war on Iran on behalf of the Saudis and the Israelis. More of that America first, America only policy. I talked about this, I think, earlier this week. Trump was briefed on these matters. He explored the options, and so far has not done anything. And he's the guy who broke the pattern set by, well, all his predecessors, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush. He really toned down the foreign adventurism. So I am not too worried about Trump going to war with Iran. He's been known to sling a few missiles around to appease the neocons that he, for some reason, employs. I guess he wants to keep his enemies closer. I would be more worried about a Biden administration, because Biden has been known to participate in this stuff to a much higher degree than Trump. But again, like everything else, we're going to find out soon. take a look at that. A couple more stories back on the home front. This is one that I saw coming, and I even tried to warn a few people for various reasons. Asians, if you're Asian, guess what? You're now a white European. Welcome to the club. And what this is, it's a reason story with no reason at all behind it other than identity politics, equity, which is the most misused term in our lexicon today, and the further erosion of America. You've got a school district in Washington State with changing demographics, and they obviously have a lot more Asians. And, you know, for some reason, in things like school test scores, certain people do better than others. So if you're newcomers who previously might have been considered, you know, what do they call BIPOCs, or, you know, a pox on you, when they start to skew the average and it doesn't look good for everybody else, you reclassify them, and then you start to demonize them. And I warned some folks. I said, hey, you're like it or not, you're one of us now. So welcome to the club. Welcome to equity. There's another old adage that says those who would have equity must do equity. And one side of our political divide just doesn't get that. Another great education story. This one not involving human demographics of any kind. In fact, the exact opposite. Our final word of the day is a name. Sheldon. Meet Sheldon. Who is Sheldon? He's a professor at Temple University. But this is 2020, so he's an unusual professor. He's a robot. Yeah, how you like that? If you're an adjunct, you know, working 40, 50, 60 hours a week for peanuts, then they will not give you tenure because that's the way the schools have gone. They don't want to pay professionals to actually, actually impart knowledge to young people. If you're an aspiring professor, maybe you've sent out 50 or 100 resumes, and you've met with all the usual excuses, you can rest assured that Sheldon is there, beeping and chirping away like C-3PO. I honestly didn't. I could only read part of this and gave up on it. He's going to teach a journalism class at Temple, which is a great school up in Philadelphia. So since it's journalism, I guess he's going to have to maybe teach them the ways of extra communism, extra fakery. What a wonderful world. And oh, by the way, the reason he's there is not to save money and, screw another adjunct out of a job. It's because of what the virus did. Got to keep the kids safe. They've not yet found a way to scare us that the robots are bringing germs. But just a few of the stories around the land. Really want to hear what you have to say about the possibility of gun control next year under Biden, maybe even under Trump. Trump has basically left that area alone. He did ban bump stocks with an executive order. And I recall when he was running in 2016, that area always seemed a little weak to me. A reporter asked him one time, how many guns do you own? He says, I like guns. Well, how many do you own? He wouldn't answer the question, much like any other politician. So tell me what you think, and the rest of you have a great and wonderful weekend. I want to say hello to everybody listening on the various podcasts. We're based out of Anchor. And then apparently there are 7 or 8 other platforms where you can find us. And I had that, but I lost it. So I'll leave you now, and I will see you back on Monday.